Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Winning Drive podcast. Of course, I'm Reeta Hubbard, the NFL chick, co-host of the Glenn and Reeta Show on 105.7 The Fan, with my guy Cordell Woodland from Shaking It Up Sports and the Ravens reporter for 105.7 The Fan. Cordell is currently doing our taping at the Ravens facility because he's always working and doing all of the things Ravens this time of year. So thank you for taking the time out to join me to do our preview edition of the Winning Drive podcast. I appreciate you. Of course, we know that the Miami Dolphins are coming to town this weekend, New Year's Eve, to face the Ravens, who really could solidify an AFC North win as well as a number one seed with a win over the Dolphins on Sunday. So I guess, is it too much to say that this is a big game? Because we kept hearing how big of a game it was last week. Okay, but truth be told, it's a non-conference game, whatever, blah, blah, blah. This, to me, is what everybody wanted last week to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bigger game in the grand scheme of things. If you're talking about standings wise and playoff seeding at this point, this is literally the battle for first place in the AFC. I think last week was a big game in its own right because it's the quote unquote Super Bowl preview. It gives you the two best teams in the NFL at that time going up against each other on Christmas night at that. On Monday Night Football. So it just adds, it's a different type of big game. But, you get in December, all these games are big, honestly.
I completely agree. So let's start with the Ravens offense against the Dolphins defense. Now, did some research on the Dolphins, and from a defensive perspective, you'd be a little bit high on them. They're fourth in total yards on defense. They are, in terms of passing defense, they are 10th in passing defense, and they are 5th in rushing defense. Now, all of those things sound good, right, Cordell? Not going to take away from what that is. But here's the problem that I have with that. When you look at the Dolphins' schedule, they play the Patriots twice. They're not good. We know that they put a 70 burger up on the Broncos, who eventually was 1-5 at one point before they started their run. So they weren't playing good football. The Giants, they played the Panthers, they played the Raiders, they played the Commanders, they played. So when you start looking at their schedule, while it's impressive, you have to take account into the guys that they played. And look, I can't change the fact that the schedule is the schedule. But you have to take into account that their opponents weren't necessarily that good and that they literally just won their first game against an opponent that was over 500 just last week against the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, you can only play who's in front of you. But you do look at their schedule and say that the Ravens are going to be their biggest test to this point. They do play the Bills twice. I think they have one more game against Buffalo.
The Bills beat them in Buffalo. They play the last game in Miami. So that's their last game. And that could potentially, depending on how this game goes, depending on what Buffalo does this weekend, could potentially be for the division, by the way.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the Dolphins, look, the story is out on the Dolphins. The book is out. We know what type of team this is. Defensively though, they're fast. They're fast. They get after you. They're aggressive. They don't sit back and just let you kind of take the game to them. They do a really good job of trying to be the ones to throw the first punch. That's what I do like about this Dolphins defense. You think back to the last couple of years when the Ravens have faced them, they have given the Ravens some problems. Because of how they blitz. They love to do that cover zero blitz against Lamar, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is a unit that plays aggressive. They play downhill, and their philosophy in this game is going to be to try to put Lamar under as much pressure as they possibly can, because that's been their game plan each time they faced Lamar. And they've got a good unit. I mean, look, they took a huge loss with Phillips going down earlier in the year. He was kind of their sack guy individually. And right now, ever since he's gone down, it's kind of been sacks by committee.
Yeah.
Like I said, they blitz a lot. So a lot of times you see three guys getting to the quarterback at the same time. The Ravens do need to be careful. The Ravens had a really good game last week from their offensive line. I thought the tackles played really well. Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses in that game against the Niners. And while they may not be facing those type of individual players like Nick Bosa and Chase Young and all those guys against Miami, you are facing a unit that has a lot of speed on that side of the ball. They need to be sound in their communication pre-snap, understand who's getting who in these blitzes. And look, if Lamar's going to use his legs in this game, I mean, we're in December. We're going into January. Lamar's legs are going to be a big part of what the Ravens do going forward. At number one, try to limit the pressure. Number two, got to take care of the ball. Lamar's going to have to be accurate in this game because they've got a pretty good secondary out there. We know what Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard can do, but I also like what they have in the secondary as well. And we'll see if Javon Holland I meant to say at the safety position as well. We'll see if Javon Holland is able to play in this game. He's on the injury report. He was limited on Wednesday. They do have guys on the back end of their defense that are really good at forcing those turnovers. And the Ravens, to their credit, have been really good at taking care of the ball over this last month or so of the season.
Yeah.
So that'll be key again for them in this game. But try to put up points. Because like the Ravens, where I talk about why I like the Ravens defense more than I like maybe Cleveland's defense, I always have been saying it's because of the marriage between that offense and the defense. The Ravens offense does a lot to help out their defense, whereas maybe before Flacco got to Cleveland, it wasn't that case for them. Now Flacco's there. It's a totally different look, at least for them offensively. So you're able to get more out of your defense. That's how I look at the Dolphins. I look at their offense doing their part, and it helps their defense out because teams are forced to play from behind a lot of times with them. So it's going to be imperative that the Ravens offense ends up helping their defense out by A, sustaining drives, B, not turning the ball over, and C, not getting in positions to where you're having empty drives and now you're playing from behind, because not only is that going to hurt your defense because they're going to be on the field quite a bit, but it's going to hurt your offense because now they're just going to pin their ears back and start sending the house, and I don't think that's what they want.
Yeah, I agree. You do have to find a way to neutralize what it is that they're going to try to do. Unlike San Francisco, who really is a stay-at-home type defense, they don't really blitz a ton, and we talked about that when we recap the game. The Dolphins do blitz, and that's going to be the difference. And so with the current struggles of the offensive line, and by struggles, I mean from an injury perspective, because we know that Kevin Zeitler went out. We really don't know what the status of that is going to be thus far. Ronnie Stanley obviously played well, but again, they didn't do a lot of blitzing, so there's that. Pat McCarry went out on concussion protocol in the San Francisco game, and prior to that, we saw them rotating McCarry and the left tackle Stanley, simultaneously, as well as the right tackle position with Moses and Fa'alele. So you got to wonder, how is that going to affect them coming into this game? If Zeitler is able to play, how is he going to be if McCarry has to come in, and is he going to even be out of concussion protocol? Although he was on the field for practice on Thursday. So you got to wonder how those things will have an effect. And then I do agree with you that the back end of that group is very good with Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard, that, we all know those guys. But it's not lost on me when they had opponents that were what we would consider formidable opponents. They failed those tests. And that puts the Ravens in, I think, comfortable position, particularly because with less personnel that they had last year, they were still successful with what Miami was doing, which to me is not much different. Yes, there's different parts now in that situation. Jalen Ramsey was added. I believe Bradley Chubb came after the fact last year. So there's some different guys that are there. But ultimately, like you said, Phillips being out, if he's not going to play, then that's something that could potentially work in the favor for the Ravens. This is one of those types of games, like you said, It's got to be put in Lamar's hands. You might have to do some things. You might have to run the ball. And look, Lamar has done really well with trying to wait to the last minute to take off and running. I get it, completely understand. But if the rush is coming, you might have to do what you have to do. I do think that you're set up much better than you were a year ago or even 2 years ago when they played Miami and they were doing the cover zero blitzes and they
Mm-hmm.
were very successful. This is not the same offense. It's not the same offensive coordinator. It's not the same offensive players outside of Lamar and guys on the line. This is a different group. And I do think that if knowing that that's going to be how this is going to play out, it could potentially work in their favor in terms of what it is that they want to do to game plan against that, because you play this opponent essentially your third consecutive year coming up. So that is helpful, but you still can't negate the fact that there's some talent level essentially on each level of this group, and that there's, despite what I said about their opponents, because I do think that somewhat does play a role, doesn't change the fact that they're considered one of a top defense in the National Football League, the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, and at this point, it's December. Everybody is in that mode of they don't want to lose right
Yeah,
now. And Miami's predictable. I'll agree to that. They're predictable. You kind of know when they're going to win. You know when they're going to lose. You knew they were going to beat Dallas at home in Miami. They're really good at home. They're a different team on the road. I will say, I think the way to get to that, you mentioned some of the games that they lost earlier in the season when they did go up against some good opponents. I think back to that game against the Eagles earlier in the year, and I
yeah,
think it'll be imperative for the Ravens to run the ball against this Miami team. You obviously want to keep that offense on the sideline as much as you can, but the run game, the Eagles are one of the better running teams in the league, but the Ravens do it better than anybody. It was a struggle for them against the Niners. I'm a little concerned about the run game going forward. We'll see. This is just the second game without Keaton Mitchell since he's gotten hurt, so we'll see
yeah,
what it looks like. But I do think that a huge key to success for them will be getting the run game going against
yeah.
Miami. You don't want to be in a situation where you just are one dimensional against this type of team. I think you do have to try to find ways to eat up clock. Points are important, but also I think in this game, time of possession will be important as well.
And I think that the off script plays that the Ravens do have are going to be extremely important. The things that Lamar is able to do that is not called, in the huddle. You know what I mean? Lamar just finding ways to make spectacular plays like we've seen on Monday against the 49ers is definitely going to be something that is going to have to keep the Ravens in this game in terms of keeping the defense of the Dolphins off of their toes. So, and nobody does it better than Lamar. Nobody in this league does it better than Lamar.
And
You
I
know,
would also say, because I've seen a lot of the discourse about the Ravens offense and how it's not on time and stuff like that, or them struggling to be an on time off. Look, this is who they are. When was
yes,
the last time the Ravens pass offense has been an on time passing attack? Even if we want to talk about this year, it's been a while. It's been a while for a combination of reasons. It's not just one thing. It's a multitude of reasons. And I think right now the Ravens are just kind of embracing who they are. It's you think back to the Chiefs over the last couple of years during their heyday with Mahomes. I mean, they haven't been an on-time passing offense. I wouldn't say Mahomes holds the ball. He extends plays. You think back to Aaron Rodgers' time in Green Bay. Maybe on the back end of his career, he became more on time. But when Aaron Rodgers was really at his best, he's extending plays. He's holding the ball as well. So it can be done. This notion that they're going to flame out because they don't have this on-time passing attack. That would be the case if maybe you had a more stationary quarterback back there. I could buy that. But when you have Lamar Jackson back there, and they're hitting on those plays the way that they are, I don't look at that as a negative thing. If anything, it's a problem for the defense because now you're starting to have to defend the second and third play each time. The first play isn't there mainly, so the second play is the scramble drill, and you get into the
right.
second play, and then the third play is Lamar actually taking off and running himself. So that has become a bigger thing for defenses to have to try to stop than him just being an on-time passer.
Completely agree. And so we'll find out how that works on Sunday's game. As Lamar continues to just make plays, just make the plays. You know what I mean? The
Mm-hmm.
ones that are scripted, the ones that are not, we'll see how that goes against that vaulting Miami defense. Let's flip it over to the Ravens defense against Miami's offense here on Winning Drive. So we know all of the good things about Miami's defense, although they could be dealing with some injuries. As what we know on Thursday, um, Raheem Mostert, their running back, and Jalen Waddle, their wide receiver, did not practice. Now, they expect Mostert to play. Jalen Waddle is dealing with a high ankle sprain that he just suffered last week. I think that one is going to be the more sketchy situation because contrary to popular belief in terms of like us seeing guys like Trevor Lawrence and even last year, guys like Pat Mahomes playing with high ankle sprains. Those guys are quarterbacks where Jalen Waddle has to run routes on a regular basis. So I'm not really sure if he's going to be able to be ready for Sunday's game. But you still got Tyreek Hill. They still got the tight end position. Mostert has 18 touchdowns this season at 31 years old against a Ravens defense that is ranked 12th currently against the run. And that is something you and I have had concerns about. Now, we'll sit and say, Christian McCaffrey, didn't go off, but he kind of did. The 49ers just really didn't go back to him much in the second half, which was in the favor of the Ravens, in my opinion, because their pass defense is really, really good. But he had 89 yards, I believe, in the first half, Christian McCaffrey. So what we've seen from Miami is that they're going to give Mostert the ball. That's going to happen. For me, I think the bigger sell is going to be you got to shut Mostert down and make this play how it does with Tyreek Hill and then the potential likes of Chase Claypool. Sorry about that. Former Steeler, got traded to the Bears. Underwhelming career now with Miami and some other guys. So when you look at this Miami Dolphins offense, I think the biggest question here is, number one, you got to figure out what you're going to do in terms of stopping the run, because I think that's important because they're going to run the football. But also, you got to figure out a way to neutralize Tua, who has done really well in terms of getting the ball out of his hands very quickly. I think he has a 2.8 second release in terms of getting the ball out. So he's one of the quicker NFL quarterbacks in terms of releasing the ball. That, to me, is imperative to kind of get him off of his game, make him confused. I don't necessarily believe that a blitz is going to get to him as fast in terms of his release, but finding ways to try to make him confused to know exactly what coverage they're going to be in, and hopefully Tua makes some wrong decisions in that game.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be priority number one, is to try to slow down that passing offense of the Dolphins. And like you said, that they make a commitment to the run game. I think that's what makes that offense so dangerous this year, is that they actually commit to the run game. In years past, they, even last year, they could run the ball, they just wouldn't stick with it. And this year they have shown that they will. And Mostert, I really have been impressed with Mostert this year. He's been healthy enough to play. He's battled an ankle injury really all year. He's been on the injury report all year for this ankle injury. And to my knowledge, he hasn't missed a game. He hasn't missed a game to this point. And so he's there for them consistently. We'll see if Devon Achane is in this game. He didn't practice on Wednesday. He's dealing with a toe injury. It seems like every week he's dealing with something. But they will run the ball. They're definitely going to run the ball, and they like to run some of those off-tackle toss plays. They run a lot of cutback toss plays. So these guys, they got to be careful not to kind of over pursue and give them that cutback lane, because that's what they're looking for. You also got to be careful for Mostert in the pass game, because he finds the end zone in a multitude of ways. I think he has the 18 rushing touchdowns, like you mentioned. But even as a receiver, he has three receiving touchdowns as well. So this is a guy that when they get into the red zone, they're not afraid to throw him the ball out of the backfield. Tua is a guy, look, you got to hit him. You got to get pressure. If they're going to win this game, it's going to be because the Ravens got pressure on Tua. You have to get that interior pressure because he wants to get a 2 to 3 step drop and get the ball out of his hands. He's looking for that first read, and rightfully so, because his first read is usually Tyreek Hill, and that dude is just always open. I'm curious to see, especially if Jalen Waddle doesn't play, how aggressive the Ravens will be when it comes to guarding Tyreek Hill at the point of contact, at the line of scrimmage. Are you going to press him down when considering, he's the one true speed threat that because they have other guys, they got Braxton Berrios, they got Cedric Wilson Jr., they got Durham Smythe, their tight end, but those guys, don't scare you in terms of taking the top off the defense or just scare you in general, because Tyreek Hill is the one guy they have that every time he touches the ball, he could score, no matter what route he runs. So I am curious to see if they decide to throw their timing off a little bit by jamming. And it's a dangerous thing to try to jam Tyreek Hill, without question. But considering Waddle may not be there, you could probably lean your coverage a little bit more towards Tyreek Hill. So even if he does beat the press, you're just looking to steal time, right? You don't want that offense to be on time, and you don't want it to be where Tua can just snap the ball and go right to the pass. You don't want it to be to where they run a lot of screens to Tyreek Hill too. Those motions that he runs are lethal, and they get him the ball sometimes right off the snap. So they've got to be ready to tackle in space. They got to just be ready to kind of rough Tyreek Hill up. This needs to be a very physical game when it comes to number 10 on their team. You got to hit him. You got to hit him a lot. Him and Tua are the two guys that need to kind of be beat up in this game to make it so that these guys don't want to have that magic that they have. But this is a dangerous offense. That offensive line, to their credit, can be really good and run.
But are they dealing with injuries on their offensive line currently?
They are. Everybody's dealing with those injuries. I'm looking. Teron Armstead hasn't been practicing. He's dealing with a bunch of different things right now. We'll see if he ends up playing. Robert as well is dealing with a hamstring, and also Austin Jackson is dealing with the oblique right now as well. So their O-line is definitely banged up. We'll see who ends up playing. I would imagine anybody that can suit up will suit up in this game on Sunday. So you just got to be careful, be ready to take these guys' best shot. And look, the Ravens, they're dealing with their own injuries themselves right now. Patrick Queen he played through that shoulder injury. Anybody that watched that game saw him dealing with a shoulder all game. He was limited earlier this week. Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith is dealing with a pec issue, and I saw him on the practice field on Thursday. His shoulder was heavily wrapped with a bandage under it. So when you start hearing about a pec issue, you immediately get to thinking about possibly a tear there. So who knows what's going on with that right now. So, and obviously Kyle Hamilton, who left the Christmas Day game after re-aggravating that knee injury, we got to see what his status is. I saw him on the practice field Thursday, wasn't really doing a lot. He's limping around a little bit. So I'm curious to see if he ends up on the field for the Ravens on Sunday. So we'll have to see who plays for both of these teams. But everybody's banged up this time of year. But for the Ravens, physicality has been their calling card. That's what's won them these big games against these elite opponents. It's going to have to be their thing again.
Yeah, I think we're all watching the Kyle Hamilton situation because we know what they look like when he's in there. He is what makes that defense go. He is a phenomenal player. Also, Brandon Stevens apparently is dealing with a concussion, and he didn't practice on Thursday. Jalen Armour-Davis didn't as well. So, like you said, this is the time of year that guys get banged up, and you do have to be concerned about that. But hopefully, you hope that the guys that are able to come in and play are able to just match up well against what the Dolphins are going to have. Because if they don't have Waddle, like you said, they still do have Berrios and other guys. Yes, I mentioned Claypool facetiously, but he is on that team. Situation wise, I definitely think that it helps obviously if Waddle doesn't play, but it doesn't make them a ton less dangerous if he doesn't play, because if he plays, he's not going to be 100% anyway. So you're going to have to just deal with the cards that are dealt. Tyreek Hill who's been dealing with an ankle injury, is still out there, still making plays. And again, Mostert is still the guy that's going to be able to run the football very well. We watched this team, the Dolphins, move the field offensively after the Cowboys scored and went up, marched down the field against the Cowboys. And so it was very easy for them. So it really is about trying to get your timing or get their timing off. So then that way you can kind of take them out of their rhythm and kind of force them to make some bad decisions. This is a game that I would really like to, I think, see more of Brent Urban. And I say that because of how tall he is and how big he is and how he could potentially get his hands and his paws up there to kind of be disruptive in terms of batting down some passes. He's really, really good at that. So I think it will be interesting to see how they set up that defensive front against this offensive line who is dealing with some injuries as of late.
No, that's a good point, and that's one that I've thought of myself, especially when you're going up against a quarterback that has this type of stature. He's not a big guy, and he gets the ball out so fast. You may not. It's going to be plenty of plays where you're not going to be able to physically get to him. So yeah, you're going to need the Brent Urbans in the middle of that line because a lot of their passes are over the middle. They do a lot of slants. They do a lot of quick stuff. So if Brent Urban, is there, he's really, really good about getting his hands up and batting balls down at the line of scrimmage. So I think that's going to be key for these defensive linemen. That hey, it's not just about getting the sack or getting the quarterback hit. If you can get your hands in the way, that's equally as good.
Completely agree with you there. So we'll give our takes in a second in terms of how we see this game faring here on Winning Drive. All right, Cordell, here it is, the moment of truth. Well, the moment of picking, not the moment of truth, but hopefully it'll be our truth on what it is that's going to be on Sunday. Ravens are 3-point favorites against the Miami Dolphins. There are a lot of people that are questioning if the Ravens are going to be able to turn around and play essentially their biggest game of the year after playing their former biggest game of the year just 6 days prior. As we know that they had to play since San Francisco on Monday and then had to take that long flight and got home very early Tuesday morning. So there's a lot of people that are wondering if the Ravens are going to be able to play two large games back to back the way that the Ravens are going to have to do it. There are many people that are wondering if the Ravens can move on from the San Francisco game. I have to assume that they've already done that because I can't see the veterans as well as John Harbaugh allowing these guys to still be worried about a game that now has happened few days ago and they have to prepare for their next opponent who could essentially help them tie up and win not only the AFC North, but the number 1 seed in the AFC. So how do you see this faring with everything that I just said? Again, this is a short week for the Ravens who took a long trip from the West Coast. The Dolphins played on Sunday. So how do you see this going? Now, the Dolphins do come to M&T where it is not it's not going to be like cold like what you would think it's going to be in December.
It's going to be windy.
Going to be 40s and windy. And so you got to think that could potentially be a favorable factor in this game for the Ravens. But ultimately, how do you see this team faring?
Well, I'll tell you what, if it feels the way it does today outside, then I mean, I don't know how much of an advantage it is for anybody because it doesn't feel like December weather out there today. But on Sunday, look, the Dolphins don't play well on the road. They don't play well on the road against good teams. So you got to give the advantage to the Ravens. And I don't usually have this type of worry about the Ravens, but you do look at the NFL and you think about a lot of teams that come off of those big-time emotional wins on prime time, and then they usually have a letdown the week after. The Ravens are, like you mentioned, they're on a short week. They're banged up in their own right now. We'll see. We mentioned some of the defensive guys. Didn't even mention Zay Flowers, who's on the injury report as well. And this isn't even just for the foot. This is now a calf injury for Zay. So this is a different injury. So we'll see what happens with him. But I do feel like the Ravens win this game. I will admit I'm a little more worried about this game than I thought I would be. Just because I think that they are going to get the Dolphins' best shot. The Ravens aren't the only one trying to get the 1 seed. The Dolphins are as well. And I think I don't know. I think I said this earlier. I don't think there's a team that needs the 1 seed more than the Dolphins. Maybe the Cowboys in the NFC. I think they're the exact same type of team. Both of them are excellent at home, and you get them on the road, and they're a different team. So the Dolphins understand how important it'll be for them to secure home field advantage for the postseason. So they're going to come in and they're going to give their best shot. But I do think the Ravens end up winning. I'll say that this game ends up being 27-23 Ravens.
Okay. I definitely think that the Ravens will win this game. It's funny because if you think about it, the last 3 weeks of the Ravens' opponents all come from the same tree. So they had the Rams. I'm sorry, the last 3 or 4. I apologize. You had the Rams coming out of the bye. Then you played San Francisco, which is Shanahan. Now you're playing Mike McDonald. Well, they all coached together at one point, remember. So San Francisco's offense is very similar to the offense that Miami runs as well. And so I think that I think that that's in favor for the Ravens because there's going to be a lot of similar looks that they already saw literally just 6 days ago. That helps them drastically. Now, obviously, the players are a little bit different because Tua to me is better than Brock Purdy. Obviously, he was a top 5 pick coming out of the NFL draft where Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant when he came out of the NFL draft, being the last pick of the draft. But ultimately, they do run similar style offenses. And I think that helps the Ravens just understand their opponent a little bit better, being as though that they just came off playing someone that has similar formations than the Dolphins. You are concerned about what this defense is going to look like, if Kyle Hamilton doesn't play, because he is the X factor in terms of what it is that they do. If Kyle Hamilton was playing and he was healthy, I don't think that this game would be that close, quite frankly, Cordell. I'm going to be honest with you. Even if Kyle Hamilton does play, he's not going to be 100%. So, not that really means like, he's a liability, because I don't believe that. I think that if you can get Kyle Hamilton to play at all, then that's, hey, a great win for you. But again, he's not going to be 100%. Same way if Jalen Waddle were to find a way to play on Sunday. I just feel like that is more unrealistic because of the type of injury and the type of player that Jalen Waddle is. But I definitely think that the Ravens will their way to a win. They know what's at stake. I don't think that they're relying on the Jets to do any of their dirty work for them. They also, even if they did, it just would mean that the AFC North would be solidified. Has nothing to do with the number 1 seed. Putting the Dolphins away obviously solidifies the number 1 seed. You are then able to kind of just relax and figure out what it is that you want to do the following week against Pittsburgh. So I think that the Ravens will find a way to win. I do think that this will potentially be a close game, but I do think that they will win by a touchdown. So I'm going 28-21 Baltimore. I do think that the weather will play a role because Lamar be out there wearing them jackets in 60-degree weather. Okay.
Yeah. He's that's that Florida in him, though. It don't take much for Lamar to pull out the heavy coats. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Exactly.
It's been times, and I hate the cold, but it's been times I've seen Lamar in the cold where it's like, come on, bro.
It ain't that cold, bro.
It ain't that cold. It ain't that cold. I will say this. You mentioned the similar offenses that the Ravens have faced down the stretch, and they all come from the same tree, like you said. I think that I think McDaniels has probably been the most creative off of that scheme than maybe McVay and Shanahan have been. McDaniels, like, he pushes the envelope. He really tiptoes the line. He's going to do some out of the box types of things. And I really like Josh McDaniels as a coach. I do check out the Hard Knocks that the Dolphins are on, the in-season Hard Knocks that they do. So I get to see kind of a little bit more of Josh McDaniels' personality. and you understand why that team plays the way that they do for him. He is literally one of the guys. He's about the same age as half of them anyway right now. But I will say I will say though that I think, and we will talk to Mike McDaniel. I mean Mike McDonald in a little bit here at the facility. But that'll be one of the things I do ask him. Just what are some of the different wrinkles that maybe you get out of Miami's offense that you may not get out of that Rams and Niners one? Because, like you said, the Dolphins have a different personnel group. You have Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert,
Right.
and those guys, some of the fastest guys in the league. So it allows you to do some funky stuff pre-snap, the motions and all that stuff that they do. The Rams or the Niners don't do the motions the way that the Dolphins do. So I will be curious to see how that changes the way, and it may not change anything because it's all window dressing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I am curious to see how that does change the overall part of the scheme when you compare those three teams.
Completely agree with you. So I definitely, there's going to be some people that's like, oh, I can see this, because of Miami's record on the road. Oh, how that's going to be not going to bode well for them, and it might not. Everything is going in the Ravens' way in that regard, in terms of them being on the road, in terms of coming into essentially it's going to be cold weather compared to Miami for sure, right? All of those things bode well. But at the end of the day, they're still fighting for their division and the number one seed the same way that the Ravens are. And I think that, everybody's going to just have to level themselves up. So we want to thank you all for listening to the Win and Drive podcast. We will be doing our recap on Monday or Tuesday of next week because New Year's is there. And so we'll be celebrating our holiday, but we'll recap hopefully a Ravens win. We appreciate you all for listening. So from Cordell to me, this is Winning Drive.